Well, good afternoon, and welcome back to our ongoing series, The Community Talks, that kicked off last week. The theme of this ongoing series is lessons that we learned during COVID-19. Now, last week we spoke about the reopening of facilities and how one should be prepared, the challenges that the community management and facility management industries are facing during the pandemic, and most importantly, what they learned and unlearned in the course of the last few months. Now, today we're shedding light on an essential component of the industry, and if I may say so, the true frontline fighters of our community. That's the security guarding force. Now, the security industry across the world have truly stepped up to the challenge of the pandemic has thrown on them. In such a short span of time, they've had to cope up with not just managing the safety of the facility, but also themselves, and at the same time perform certain roles which are usually considered a very non-traditional in nature. Now, be it limiting the number of people entering the facility, ensuring the social and physical distancing, and also taking the temperatures, among others. But the real question we're discussing here today is how the security industry is adapting to this new norm and how to survive in this market. So, talking to us today is Mr. Adil Abdel Hadi, the Director of Operations and Development of the Security Industry Regulatory Agency, and Mr. Philip Ducker, the Head of Security from FANIC. So, welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for taking time out for us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to start off with you, Mr. Philip. What has been the impact of this entire pandemic that, both regionally and across the world for the security industry in particular?
Like every other industry, obviously security has been affected by the prevalence of the pandemic. It's affected different market sectors, obviously, as well, in relation to different ways it's been come across. For example, the hardest hit for me has obviously been the tourism and travel in general. The closure of the airport has been a major issue, obviously, that everyone had to deal with. But obviously, then you've got hotels and eating, restaurants where security guarding service involving was splashed, to be honest. This sector slowly making its way back, obviously, with the opening of the mountains, although the timings are huge. But, as obviously, even then, within the
I think your voice is breaking a bit, Mr. Philip.
Okay. Obviously, the requirements have obviously increased slightly in relation to shopping malls, where you have the screening and so on. There obviously have been some sectors that have been affected by this, notably, obviously, the healthcare sector. Security in general is not what I would call a resilient source. We are very much affected by what goes on in the world around us. Certainly, when you look at smaller companies in relation to security, they struggle to replace the manpower that they may have had in relation to infections or anything that's affected their business, small in nature. When you look at the larger companies, you're very much looking towards the abundance of manpower that they have that's been temporarily, or even in some cases, permanently made redundant. Not specifically in relation to making redundant, but they're redundant at their camp, accommodation. I
think your voice is still a little breaking off. Maybe.
Okay. So obviously the cost associated with holding visas and holding the training, the regulations are obviously still all there, and that's been one of the biggest challenges that we've found, is we have obviously a FANIC that we have made nobody redundant in relation to this. We've retained every single manpower that we possibly can have. And that's one of the big things that we have done. Obviously, the recent ministerial decree did assist in some regards of the retention of personnel, but obviously that can't be seen as a long-term answer. It. In the short term, yes, the industry has significantly. I think it will come back.
I think we're still facing a bit of a breakup. Maybe would you want to try switching off your video and repeating it? So maybe it gets a little better. Just to...
My team's come and try and help the connection.
Do
Can you
you
hear
want
me?
to? Yeah, I think now it's a little better.
I'll try it again with a video, see if it makes any improvement.
Okay, sure.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Marvelous. Okay.
So we just want to, if you can just tell the audience again, the kind of impact that the pandemic has had regionally for the security sector in particular.
Certainly. So as I said, the security industry is very much in effect by this, same as every other task. When you look at the type of service sectors that you would claim security is broken up into, so healthcare, banking, schools, obviously the most affected has been certainly in relation to airport closing. So issues for security and everybody else. There are some sectors obviously that haven't been affected as much. Certainly, when you look at healthcare, you're looking down the realms of it's remained pretty much the same. With the malls opened up, obviously you've got people coming back to the malls. You have increases in security guards in relation to malls and on media equipment as well. That will take time, and I'm very, very pleased to say that Arnec and every other
Just
company.
to interrupt, Mr. Philip, I think again the audience is unable to hear. What I could suggest is maybe you could log off and log in again. In the meantime,
Okay.
I'll speak to Mr. Adil and
Okay.
we can
I'll try that.
join in after that. Yeah? Great. So sorry for that. We're just trying to work it out. So we'll get into the entire impact that it's happened on the industry. But Mr. Adil, what I want to start off with you is, of course, a main concern is the threat, the very threat to the security officers while conducting their duties. So can you shed some light on some of the guidelines one should follow for security guards in order to protect themselves?
Good afternoon. Mainly, as you know, the security guards, they are in the front line, and they are the people who actually get more contact with the general public. So the vulnerability is there, the threat is there on the security guard or the security officers, as you call them. Mainly, as you know, this COVID-19 is something totally new, and there is all conflicting reports as to what measures should be taken. Okay, and every day, if you follow the media, which I don't advise much, is that the conflicting different report, even from the WHO. Okay, I mean the latest we heard that even you cannot contract it from services. Okay, which is what they said. But the precautionary measures they actually take, the standard ones, which is wearing the mask, wearing gloves, keeping the social distance, using sterilizing liquids, and so on. But that still does not really give them the 100% protection that actually needed. But that's the measures they're supposed to take, and that's the only thing that they can do till a solution is actually found to this virus, or how way to treat it, or to combat it in public. But till now, there is nothing at all. It's all trial and error. But the measures they're taking is just the standard measures done by the Security Industry Authority and done by the Ministry of Health. Okay, and that's the only thing they can take. And it's not just at the workplace, even at home, where they live. I mean, in Dubai, for example, I mean they're living in camps. So there is precautionary measures as well. They have to take the normal, the washing of hands, making sure everything is clean, wearing masks all the time, and so on and so forth. Of course, these are all it add cost to the security companies. In any case, but it is necessary measures that has to be taken.
True. Thank you so much, Mr. Adil. And of course, I would like to encourage the audience, at any point of time, if you have any questions, we want to keep this discussion as engaging. Let's remember that we're all learning about this together. And the more we discuss, the more things that we may find insightful as well. So, welcome back, Mr. Philip. So,
Thank you. I hope you can hear me this time.
yeah, much clearer. So let's start off again with you, talking about the impact that the pandemic has had on the security industry.
Okay, so as I was saying, if anyone can hear me this time around,
Perfectly
obviously
clear now.
different market sectors have been affected by the virus in different ways. Clearly, you have the airport, which has been hugely affected. That obviously, in turn, has affected tourism in general, health sector, so on and so forth. Healthcare has obviously been extremely resilient. When you start looking down the route of the shopping malls, clearly they're opening up again, which is great, and I'm very, very, very pleased for that happening. So when you look at the actual temperature detection that's taking place, the screening as you go into the malls, I'm very pleased to say that's happening. At Farnet, we made sure that all our personnel fly those as much as is humanly possible. We are checking everybody in every contract. When you look at the security industry in general, not resilient, to be honest with you, very much affected by security. Smaller companies obviously have been struggling in relation to been affected in any way by the virus, don't have any contract. Larger companies themselves, many of the large companies, we are the other way around. We have cards idle. And when you start looking at idle, obviously you're looking at the salaries, the training, visas, so on. Costs are all still there. Clients inevitably want to have, the moment they can open up again, they want to be able to have those guards available to them at a moment when they can have them. It's not a matter of just
Again, we are having a slight breakup.
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously, people want their guards back, and in many instances, and I would certainly accept, people want those guards back that they had in the first place. People have taken time and used resources to actually train those guards. It's obviously a short-term matter, but obviously the ministerial decree has helped in this. But how long is it? I don't know. And that's where, in the long run, I think we just have to try and work with the government, work with the authorities, and try and fight through this as best we can.
We have a question that has come up. I would like to address it to Mr. Adil since we were talking about the guidelines to protect the security industry. It's from Mr. Duck. So he's asking you that whether if temperature screening devices such as thermal cameras are mandatory to install or whether handheld devices are okay to use. So are thermal cameras mandatory?
No, it has not been. Nothing has been issued by the authority with regarding mandatory use of thermal cameras or handheld devices or the rest. All they're saying is that it's advisable for people to check the temperature of people entering the building, but it's nothing in the law. Okay, and of course. We're not sure whether that is going to become mandatory or not. That is still under discussion. But so far, no, it's not. Not mandatory at all. And now, simply because now there is so many thermal cameras out there or thermal devices out there in the market, and the effectiveness of it is quite sparse. I mean, till actual certain, you have to test it. If you're going to install it, you have to test it and test it properly. It's got to be installed properly, okay, in order to actually get the correct reading. But at the moment, there is no guidelines, okay, and there isn't any mandatory education at all that is going to be enforced on the industry yet.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Adil. Mr. Philip, I also want to talk to you about the kind of challenges that one is facing right now, especially, the business front or the operational front. Can you shed some light on that as well, please?
So the pandemic has inevitably had a significant impact on the profitability and the retention of contracts. With the abundance of manpower, clients are becoming increasingly savvy as to what they can get away with and the nice, trying to reduce the cost. And a lot of that revolves around they know that security companies have got a lot of guards sat around in the nicest sense. The market are now becoming the point of the levels are becoming what people are actually asking. Companies need to look for long-term costs associated with this, not dive into the market, making promises to clients that they can't fulfill in the future. Many of the leading companies, frankly, have shown that they're very much in line with trying to keep a sensible cost associated, but internally and externally to our clients. It's something that market-wise, it's a temporary blip in the night. We need to look at how long this is going to last. Because although people are giving costs fantastically, they're the ones further down the line that you'll have a failure of service quite quickly. Those things. Operationally, managers, supervisors have had to deal with their excess manpower and had to facilitate things like as much operational excellence as possible. Clearly, many companies have had significant issues in relation to the virus. Barnett's been real. I would say fortunate. Obviously, we all planned at the same. We have accommodation.
I think we're again facing certain the breaking of the voice. Because you're coming out with some very interesting points, and I really want the audience to hear that. Do you want to just try logging off and logging in again? I think while we sort that out, Mr. Adil, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, sure. So there have been a couple of very interesting questions, prior to that. We've had, of course, someone talking about training. We will get into that. Mr. Jamie has spoken about, how can we control the people who are monitoring their body temperature will not argue with the security? I think this comes to a very key question that even we had on our agenda, where, we're speaking about the reports that were there, across the world about security officers being attacked by public. So can you shed some light on, how one can handle these kind of situations, and what kind of legal cover can one look into, especially for security officers who are there in front of the line during this pandemic?
Well, the issue here, it is very serious indeed, and it's happening all over the world. Okay, that security officers trying to follow their instructions, but at the end of the day, the public does not accept it. I mean, particularly people say that I'm free to move. I mean, you cannot stop me. What right have you got? There is no legal cover at all for these security officers. There is no laws that give them the authority to actually do that. And as you might appreciate, this COVID-19 is, as I said, is totally new. People are just gradually dealing with the consequences of it, and this sort of incidents. We did not expect that. I mean, a security officer is there, and all he's doing is following instructions issued to him. Okay, but then the question is going to come: who issued you these instructions? Is it the company? Is it the client that actually employing you? Is it from the government? And what legal right have you got? Okay, to do this. I agree totally. I mean, it's got to be handled with really cotton gloves. I mean, this is an issue that security guards are experiencing all over the world, and it reached to the stage that they're being physically attacked as the result of this. People are actually nowadays are in a very stressful situation. The public are. Okay, and of course, to air this frustration and the rest of it, they might find it in a security guard. I mean, this is facts of life. Okay, but the thing with it is that we need training. We need to train, our security officers in conflict management. Okay, how to handle the situation, how to diffuse the situation. Okay, and to train them how to use this equipment as well. Okay, for example, I mean, I give you an example that's happened to me. I mean, I was going to a supermarket, and I parked in the car park, and it's a 5-minute walk in the sun. So when I reached the supermarket and they tested my temperature, okay, of course it was high. Okay. And they said, you cannot come in because your temperature is high. So I said, listen, give me 5 minutes, I'll cool down and then take my temperature again. So this is the sort of thing, this is the message that is supposed to reach these people, how to handle members of the public. And security officers, they got to appreciate, it's not the use of power. Okay. They put them in a position, and it's not the use or abuse the power that now I'm in the front door at the supermarket. I can let you in or not let you in. That's not the issue. Okay, so training, and proper advice to these security officers, I think, might resolve this issue.
Yes, I'm sure. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Jamie, and a few others also who had asked that. Welcome back, Mr. Philip. I hope you were making some very interesting points out there on the kind of operational challenges that one is facing and the potential risks that one is facing in the industry. So, if you can just elaborate on that again. Okay, I think we seem to be having a lot of internet issues from there. Okay, let's take in just a few more questions we've had a lot of questions that are coming in. We have a question from Ms. Sheila, who says, I believe that there are a few confusions on how they deal with the residents and the scenario. To share an example, a family was in the beach in the water, and the security guard has to scream on top of his lungs to tell them to do social distancing. So don't get me wrong, is he doing his job, but is it necessary?
Well, as I mentioned before, the training is not adequate for those officers to know how to handle situations like this. But as I said, this is totally new. It never happened before. Social distancing, we never heard of it till this COVID-19 came into scene. I think last time it was 1918. Okay, and so the training need to be done, because at the end of the day, okay, that's not the issue. I mean, that's for starters. It's not the way security officers should behave. Okay, because he's supposed to diffuse the situation and explain it to these people that got to have the social distancing, whatever, but not to shout and use the authority, because he hasn't got the authority at all to actually shout. Security officers have the same powers, the same as a normal citizen. They don't have any extra legal powers at all. Okay, we need to get that legal power to the officer, and we've been fighting for that. Okay, in order to actually have the extra power that they can actually enforce the law, because at the moment they cannot enforce anything. But that needs the whole authorities. We need the judicial system. Okay, we need the insurance companies. We need the police. We need the authorities. They all sit together in order to decide what authority they're going to give and what right they're going to give to the security officer. But no, that practice of shouting and abuse of authority is not acceptable. No.
Great.
So training is definitely needed.
Definitely. Training is one of the key things that we need to even shed light on. So, Mr. Philip, back to you. I mean, there were so many interesting points that you were making out there, and we really hope that the audience can hear as well about the operational and the business impact that the pandemic has had on the security industry.
Oh, lovely. If you can't hear me, please tell me straight away and I'll turn the video off. We'll see how we go. I have a team of people trying to solve these problems here. So obviously, as I said, business-wise, there's been problems. The smaller companies have been affected in one way, the larger companies have been affected in another. And one of the major issues, obviously, now is transportation as well. Today, the MALs changed their timings again. Farnic is a large company, a large FM company. It's an award-winning FM company, but we have our transportation routes to help us provide that service. The timings have changed today. Obviously, costs go through the roof when we do that. That's one of the challenges that we have to do. Because although we don't want to pass that cost on to our clients, we obviously don't want to accept it ourselves. And I think that's where you have to have a lot of back and forth between yourselves and the clients. But obviously, we're led by the government in how we can actually proceed on certain things. Operationally, it comes down to the excess manpower in many regards. We've dealt very, very well with the excess manpower that we've had, and we've been able to ensure that certain protocols are in place. Clearly, companies have been affected. Farnex's been fortunate, as I said earlier, whether you heard me or not. We've been in a position where we have multiple accommodations across the country. We've been able to ensure that we don't have, if we have a case in one, it doesn't affect all services. Our security use the same accommodation in many places as the FM services do. I feel very, very sorry for the companies that have been very badly affected by this. Certainly, some of the larger companies have had very, very bad infection rate, and my heart goes out to them, to be honest with you. We've made sure that certainly hygiene, social distancing, everything that we can do as an FM company, we're very, very positive to get across that we have the FM side of it, we have the sanitary, we have the cleaning, we're making sure our accommodation, our transportation are absolute. But that all works in with operational management.
True. I mean, there's one more very interesting question. I mean, of course, I leave it up to both of you. Anyone would want to answer that? Let me just see. I had just taken it down. I think it's about talking about how all the three components, the facility management, the community management, as well as the security industry having to work together now, especially, after the pandemic. Can you shed some light on the importance of this kind of a synergy that one has to create?
So for myself, I'd always encourage all my security teams, from the guard all the way to the top, to talk to their clients. No more so when you're looking at community-based projects. They're a whole entity in themselves. They're a community of people who want to be dealt with in a certain fashion. Very, very complex. Only by allowing those security teams to interact with the management feel that they're getting their message across. Each individual area, each individual complex, compound, whatever you want to call it, they all have their own ways of doing things. They all have the things that they want to do. Making sure that passes to the guard, passes to the management, myself, with many community managers on a daily basis, make sure no more so than at the moment during the COVID pandemic, that the message is across. We are making sure that the guards have gloves, they have sanitizing. We've been lucky that we've had a lot for the project we have, and the people have actually housed the guards on site. So the ability to have great clients who are willing to go that extra mile to do this is huge, because obviously it instantly negates any people outside.
Great. Mr. Adil, I want to ask you one question that Mr. Jamie has asked. As a security expert, do you think that the security should now start communicating with the UAE government to start drafting these regulations?
Well, the authority is actually the Security Industry Regularity Agency. The legislators are actually in constant talk with the government in order to actually produce regulations in order to cope with such events. Okay. Of course, getting the regulations out is going to take time. Okay. And as I said, this is something new, and they have to get involvement of other parties into this that actually affected directly by new regulations. The other thing as well, which is any regulations is going to cost companies money. Okay. And now the government and the authority are trying very hard indeed in order to alleviate this burden. They don't want to add any extra cost to companies. Okay. Simply because at the moment, economically, all the companies are suffering, regardless whether they're in the man guarding or they're in the equipment or installation or distribution. They're all suffering. So that's the other thing. That's the other factor they have to consider, because today, if you start implementing any regulation, that's going to be extra requirements on companies in order to provide extra equipment or to provide extra training or whatever it is, and that's cost on them. Okay, so is it economically viable? No, at the moment. But the authority, I can assure you, they are talking to the government and they are working very hard indeed to compromise and reach that sort of happy medium that will be acceptable all around.
True. We also have another question from Mr. Dirk. We need procedures on how to deal with once someone has a high temperature above 37.2. So at any busy entrances especially. So do we need to send them away, or do we need to take the details and inform the DHA? Especially in business entrances is what he's saying. Do any of you want to take this?
From my perspective, it's a horrible question. Thank you, Dirk. When it comes down to it, obviously what a security guard can and cannot do is regulated, and they have to be extremely careful when dealing with members. Do you have the power to? Do you have the power to take their details? No, you do not. I would hope that, certainly in malentrance, there should be police officers, CID around. The case is obviously identified, so has a high temperature, not necessarily the virus, that there is suitable police presence to ensure that there is a way. Because without that, the person have a high temperature, he's either going to walk straight well, and we're not going to be able to, or he's going to turn around and walk off. Either way, it's an unacceptable thing.
Certainly a tricky question. Mr. Adil, do you want to shed some light on that question as well?
Well, as Doug said, it is actually a tricky question, simply because there is no authority for the security officers. Each organization or shopping mall or a hotel or whatever it is, don't have their own instructions, which is being created by the security manager or by the HR department or whatever. So everybody is doing his own thing. Okay, in the absence of regulations, okay, and clear guidelines, that's the only thing they can do, which is they think is best for their organization. Okay, and turning people away. I mean, you could sue them. I mean, those officers, you can actually take them to court. Okay, to refusing entry into a public place, because there is no law that states that. Okay, but they are enforcing it. Okay, for the good of the people. It's guidelines. And as I said, it is a very gray area that got to be overcome somehow. I agree with Doug. I mean, there got to be somebody there of authority. What do you do with the people when you discover they got high temperature? Does high temperature means that they got COVID-19? Okay, no, it doesn't. Some people hasn't even got the high temperature and they still got the COVID-19. So how, there is no expertise in security guard to decide whether this person is infected or not. Okay, and taking temperature does not mean anything at all. It doesn't mean, because it doesn't test for COVID-19. I mean, you're just testing somebody's temperature. That's it. Okay, and as I said, it is a gray area that really need to be addressed by the authority, and agree. But then, how many entrances are there in a city or a town? You cannot put a police officer in every single one of them. It's impossible to do. To put a constraint like that on a member in order to restrict people from entering that particular premises. So, as I said, it is a gray area, and it's got to be addressed properly with proper guidelines. And I'm sure those guidelines will come out as soon as the authorities has actually found out exactly what is the most effective way to combat this COVID-19 and the precautionary measures that are supposed to be taken by everybody out there in order to combat it. Okay, but at the moment we are in the early stages. It's only been blown up, for the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
So it's still early stages yet to actually decide on that. So I suggest people just have to bear with it for now. Okay, till we actually reach the point that we get a direct and clear solution.
True. I mean, for those of you who have just joined us, we've had some very interesting discussion going on about the security industry, and we've spoken about the impact that it's had on the regional sector, as well as the operational and business impact. We've also spoken about some of the guidelines, how security guards can protect themselves, both in terms of physically as well as legally also. Taking that forward, Mr. Adil, I want to talk to you about the insurance part of it. What can companies do for these guards, especially when we're talking about ensuring these security officers in the front of the line?
Well, you see, it's in different countries there is a different insurance cover, okay, and we all know from experiences that insurance companies normally they like to take the premium, but they don't like to pay out, so they're gonna find any excuse at all not to pay. Okay, so how they're gonna consider that unless this COVID-19 or any other viruses or something like that being specifically written into insurance policy, okay, then insurance company will not pay, okay, and I'm sure if they put that in, the premiums is going to go sky high, okay, for the companies, okay.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, they have companies normally have combined liability insurance, public liability insurance, and the rest of it, but that's a very limited cut because nobody experienced this thing before, so to be included in there, and that's mainly accidents at work and so on and so forth. That is covered for the covered by the insurance company for the security guard. But is falling ill because of a virus, is that covered in an insurance policy? I don't think so. Okay. So that's something that got to be talked about, and that's why the reason why I said to get a solution for this, we need all these authorities together around the table: insurance companies, the police, the legislator of the security companies or the private security industry. Okay, the legal system, the Ministry of Justice or whatever, they got to sit around the table to actually work out, okay, the ideal solution in order to safeguard those poor people that's sitting on the front line, putting themselves at risk. Okay, and we've seen it now in even doctors at hospitals. Okay, they're facing the same thing. Okay, for insurance companies to pay. Okay, so this really got to be addressed, but that's got to be addressed from a very, very high authority up there and combined together, and they got to have the insurance companies present at, in those meetings in order to have their say, because they all got a point to put forward.
True.
So that's what I think should happen.
True. Another interesting point that we did touch upon during the discussion was, the synergy between the security sector and the community management and the service providers. So, Mr. Philip, I wanted to ask you, how better can the service provider help the community manager, the property manager, to ensure better delivery?
I think it's really a combination of a back and forth communication when it comes down to it. I'm always happy to look at what community managers, project managers have to say, how they think they can improve. Clearly, there are standards in relation to security, and different companies have different standards. I personally believe that whatever the service I provide is the best service that we can absolutely do. But I'm always looking for improvement, and the actual attention to detail matters when it comes down. You want to be able to provide the client. Sometimes client asks for things that you simply cannot provide, whether it's a logistical involvement or it's cost related. But the actual, when you talk to your clients give you feedback. Clients at the very least believe thinking something is being done. Actions that I have asked these to make recommendations that in no way look close. But always combined is the communication. And I've been and communication is the biggest thing. I want to feel if I pick up the phone and I phone the security manager, they phone me, for instance, I want to be able to feel being listened and whether it be a complaint or a suggestion, something's being done about it.
I think again, we're having a little bit of a difficulty with the thing is breaking.
Okay. Try and turn the video. Can you hear me better? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you hear what I said?
Sort of. So if maybe if we can talk.
When it comes down to it, it's communication. It must go both ways, and the client, in the long run, is always right, pretty much. is what does the client need? What are their expectations? Try and keep them. Don't try and match their expectations. And go that little mile further. Edgar, can you hear me?
Yes. Great. Let me just get to the next question. I want to now touch upon technology. That's quite a key thing, and I want to open this out to both of you. How can we make use of technology, and do you think that there'll be a fear of replacing manpower, especially after the pandemic?
Sorry, could you just repeat that one?
Sure. I want to touch upon technology, and I want to ask you that how can we make use of technology now? And do you think that there will be a fear of replacing manpower, especially after the pandemic?
I mean, security moves slowly. Technology moves very, very slowly in relation to actual security. It's not something that, it depends on the project, down to it. Technology in some places is far more advanced than in others. I don't see security technology replacing manned security services anytime soon. To be honest with you, most of the security tenders, RFPs, quotations that you get are manpower based. Obviously, there is very much a technology part of it. So Farnex, for instance, have a smartwatch. Our smartwatch has geofencing. It can provide feedback. It has many different things it can actually do, and it's communication tools as well. But we're building on our original smartwatch. We're developing a new smartwatch that can even monitor your blood pressure. Now, that obviously goes back to the safety and security of the guards. But it's something that they should both work at the same time.
I think Mr. Dirk had a very nice statement saying technology doesn't stop people, but people stop people. So, Mr. Adil,
I'm very much the first person to agree with Dirk. Dirk knows my background. So, when it comes down to it, it's boots on the ground. Security has eyes and ears, and technology can only go so far. Unless you're looking at incredibly advanced systems, which, in some places, yes, but it's an infinitesimally small part of the market.
Mr. Adil, do you have anything to say to this?
Well, I tend to agree to a great extent with Doug there, but with Philip. But what is happening is that the technology and the technology companies are driving this very hard indeed, and yes, we're going to be living in a totally different world. Okay, after this pandemic, things have changed a lot. Okay, I've seen it. I mean, particularly in the UK, is that people are actually changing from the bit of man guarding to, for example, patrol visits, CCTV remote monitoring. They're heading towards more technology because, first of all, it's cheaper, it's cost effective, and in Europe in particular, manpower is the most expensive one. I mean, you talk about reliability. Okay, this is debatable. It depends how you recruit them, where you recruit them from, how you train them, and the rest of it, and then you get the reliability. But then you look the example. If somebody is got a side door and is putting two guards there, okay, the way I look at it, they might be able to replace those two guards. Okay, putting a camera there and access control. That's it. Okay, so they can actually control that particular entrance to the building. So I believe that in the future, they're gonna be less use of manpower. Okay, in the basic sense as guarding. Okay, but as I said, technology does not work on its own. Okay, and manpower in the future is not going to work on its own. Okay, combine them together, you get that smart solution. Okay, because at the end of the day, it's man-made. Okay, this technology. So it's going to be a combination of both. People got to strike a happy balance. Okay, economics is going to play a huge part in it. Okay, it's got to be cost effective. Now we're seeing artificial intelligence. We've seen the use of robots. Okay, in certain areas. I mean, now even in Dubai, I've seen robots being used in malls. Okay, so they can actually do. They're being used in hospitals to go and talk to the patients. Okay, rather than the nurses going in there and exposing themselves to whatever viruses or infections out there. So I can actually see it. Okay, but as I said, we can never get rid of the manpower because any technology, there's got to be somebody behind it to operate it. Okay, at the end of the day. So
That's a
that's what I
very
think.
interesting perspective.
I think a lot of it, Mega, comes down to cost.
Hmm.
Certainly for the time being, what are clients willing to pay for? And yeah, I absolutely take on board everything that's just been said. I agree with it. But when it comes down to it, it comes down to the cost associated with it, whether the clients wish to pay that money.
True. I think a company that has really created that balance and that combination is Farnic. So I really want to ask you, Mr. Philip, what are some of the initiatives that Farnic has taken, especially in the security division during the pandemic?
So in relation to technology?
Yeah, in related technology as well as in general, the kind of initiatives that you have taken during this last few months for the pandemic for the security industry.
Okay, so like we have a smartwatch that allows us to, certainly when you look at the question a moment ago about project manager, community manager, that allows us the ability to monitor exactly what's taking place. And clients have the ability to liaise with us. They can view that information, they can see the reports. And that's a major part of it. For me, allowing the client the ability to see what is going on and then it's a huge thing. It gives the client the feeling that actually I'm getting what I paid for, frankly. You see transparency and transparency.
It's again breaking a bit, your voice.
Wow. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's two things really for me. Farnic have ensured personally that we haven't seen anybody off. One single person has been laid off in relation to being taken. And we have gone to huge lengths to make sure that hasn't happened. Clearly, that's had a lot of complications, but it's something that we pride ourselves on. We are very much motivated by keeping our staff motivated. We've also diversified. Obviously, we have, as I said, we have multiple locations across the country. And we're able to look at those accommodations and the transportation routes that we have. And yeah, in some respects, yes, we probably made savings because we looked at our accommodation, we looked at our transportation and how we can actually do it. Obviously, we as an FM, we then have the ability to provide all the services that we've looked at. So you look at the sanitisation, they're trying to get all those services on board, essentially set up one client at a time. I'm pleased to say, obviously, that we haven't been actually negatively affected in relation to the actual COVID-19 pandemic in relation to our personnel. But obviously, it had a massive impact on everybody else. The client, when it comes down to it, I've tried to bend over backwards for what we do. We've reduced manpower, because actually we're not obliged to reduce manpower. But these are times, as the doctor said, these are times that we've never come across. I hope at times that we never hit the end, quite frankly. But you either assist your clients when they're finished. We don't have clients anymore. People will go to somebody after the fact.
In the last bit, you were breaking again a bit.
So I just said you need to ensure that you need to work with your clients. You need to make sure that the clients are your top priority. And although contractually, in many cases, we have been obliged to reduce manpower, it's not a matter of contractual obligations at that point. It's a matter of good business sense, working with your clients and making sure when this is all over, you come out with the same clients that you went in with. The client hasn't left you because you haven't been comfortable.
Perfect. I mean, coming to the next question, I want to open it out to both of you. Now we are at the second stage of reopening of facilities. So, how do you think this entire thing has changed the security industry as a whole? And what kind of approach do you think, the security guarding industry has to take now post this crisis?
In my opinion, as I said earlier, is that we are heading towards a totally different world, a different approach, and this lockdown, which is happened, did not actually help. It's necessary; it has to be done, okay, but it's actually got its own side effects. So I believe that the more training and the more understanding of the security officers out there of what is actually happening around them, the old ways of doing things are not going to work. So they have to be trained on new approaches, how to, and straightforward, simple, how to deal with people. Now people coming out of this lockdown and the rest of it. So it is going to be totally different. Okay, it's going to be more of PR work, other than actually heavy-handed security. Okay, of people. Okay, so that's got to be done. A lot of conflict management training got to be conducted. Okay, so they can handle any situation at all that they come across. Okay, but it's going to be totally different. The approach is going to be totally different. The businesses are going to be totally different. And then you might find that with the economy as it is, that is going to be less use of manpower. So they're going to use less guards, for example, in order to save. Okay, so the onus is going to fall on a fewer guards, not like in the old days. A place who's got 50 guards, they might reduce them to 25 and do with it. Okay, so the responsibility is going to be more. So in order to compensate that shortage, training got to be done so people can actually know how to handle any situation they come across. So yes, it is going to be a totally different world out there.
True. Mr. Philip, would you have an insight to this?
Certainly. So I certainly take on board many of the things the doctor said, and I agree with many of them. I personally think the face of security will, however, be unlikely to change with respect to the service we supply to our clients. Due in main to the way the majority of the requests are laid out, the clients establishing their own requirements. However, with services providers streamlining their services with accommodation transport, and with the implementation of future technologies, the market moving forward, and I believe certainly for Planet, will be able to assist in a range of industries. I do believe at the moment there are too many individual security companies inside the market, which are lowering the cost beyond what is possible. As I'm sure the doctor can appreciate, there are, and many of the people on here can appreciate, there are fixed costs in relation to in providing a security guard. And I see many providing security services below. That is totally unsustainable in the long run, to be honest. I do believe that the general perception of security personnel has improved, and that members of the public are sort of working with the security guards as best as they possibly can. And they understand that the guards are there for their safety.
Bit of a
See whether you're
disturbance.
getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, the last bit, there was a little bit of a disturbance.
Okay, so I was saying that I do believe that the general perception of security personnel, as far as anybody else, has improved in the eyes of clients, in the eyes of the public. Certainly, the public appears to be very, very happy and accommodating to work long with the security guards, screening them, and so forth. Very important that it takes place, and it must continue. But it's only with the assistance of the public, and obviously we go back to the earlier conversation, we can make this work.
Sure.
Whether this is a long-term trend or not is a completely different thing. But certainly, as a FANIC, I received appreciation from companies and from people, how my guards, because I can't talk to this, how my guards have interacted with people in these times.
True. We do have just a few more minutes left, so I would encourage the audience, if you have any questions or any thoughts, do share it now. And coming back to both of you, I mean, do you have any sort of closing thoughts before we end this conversation?
Well, what I would like to conclude with is that as we're going to be heading towards a totally new, different world out there, economy is going to play a major role because of what is actually happened to companies financially. So I believe they're going to be, because if you invest in equipment, for example, it's a one-off investment, okay, that will last you a few years. But the use of manpower, you're going to be spending, okay, on salaries, accommodation. The cost is ongoing. So I think clients will be looking at combination between both the manpower and technology to produce what they actually require, and they're going to be governed by the budgets. Okay, most companies, if not all of them, they are not going to have the same budgets for security as they had in the past before this pandemic. Okay, so at the end of the day, in the short term anyway, they're going to be looking at costs. Okay, and I'm sure they're going to be looking at costs right across the organization, not just the security cost of it. Okay, so everybody's downsizing and the rest of it. And if you downsize, you're not gonna need that much security. So that's the logic behind it. So I think this is it's going to be very interesting world we're heading, and we will see how it actually will pan out, and I hope for the best.
Mr. Philip, do you have any closing thoughts before we get? There are a few questions before I take them on.
I was just going to say that as a service provider, I would certainly go with what the doctors just said. As a service provider, I would never supply security guards to somebody when I see too many security guards. If I go and do a site survey or whether there's a requirement from a client, it's very much what is the best service. That might be more sometimes, it might be less than what has been stated, but I'll always tell you my opinion and what I think is best. And so going to Maria's question, no, not at all. When it comes down to it, it's not just a matter of public relations. It's not just a matter of earning money. We're in times that are unprecedented. And as I said, you want to come out of it with more clients than you went into in the nicest sense. You don't want to lose the clients you have from doing stupid things like increasing the rate of your security service you provide. For me, it's public service almost when it comes down to it. We're all in this together. I might get it, God forbid, everyone else might get it. The most we can do is try to read it the best we can.
True. I think that's very well said. We have a question from Mario. He said that, have you changed your bill rate for extra requested services such as temperature taking, or many of these requests require our personnel to take increased personal risk?
As I said, no, nothing whatsoever.
Okay. So, of course, Mr. Duck, we are having more such sessions, and we hope to get in more dialogue in the thing. As I said earlier in my discussion, this is all about learning for all of us. We are all on the same, we can't say same boat, because in the last webinar, we had someone who put it very nicely. We are all facing the same storm, but we're all in different boats. So definitely we're trying to get in as much discussion as possible and, get as much information out there. And of course, for me, as a closing thought, I would just like to thank everyone. I mean, I would like to thank both of you for taking your time out today. And of course, our key sponsor, Farnik, who has been supporting us during this ongoing series. But last but not the least, I would really like to thank all of those frontline heroes of this industry. I don't think we can thank them enough, who are out there protecting our facilities and putting themselves at risk. So I certainly do hope that, such discussion can encourage and maybe change certain things and protect them in a much better way. So we will be back next Tuesday with another interesting session. So do stay tuned for those details and don't forget to tag us online, as we would really like to know your opinion about today's session and how we can make this better for you. So until next time, stay safe and Eid Mubarak. So thank you again, gentlemen. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
I would invite, just on a closing note, I would invite anybody who ever has any questions in relation to security that I might be able to assist with, please feel free to contact me.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Philip.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Mr. Adil. Thank you.